When I was growing up, I didn't really have much of a musical preference. I didn't have a favorite band or artist. I'd just kind of hear something in the car and go, yeah, that sounds pretty good. I didn't listen to a lot of music, but I did play a lot of games, and oh boy. Live and Learn, Open Your Heart, His World Crush 40, His World Zebrahead, they were all fucking bangers. I didn't realize it when I was 9 and looking up Sonic AMVs on the family PC, but the songs I was listening to back then really shaped my taste in music today. So I thought it would be fun to look back on the history of video game music, where it started, how it evolved, and of course highlighting some of my favorite tracks. You already know where this is going. For a while, games didn't actually have much music in them, just sound effects for when you pick up an item or something. There were some games with music though, and it makes my ears sad. Obviously, they didn't really have much to work with back then. I mean, they could barely do graphics. You think they could spare processing power on sound? I don't have a lot to say on the Atari because I don't really have any connection to that era of games. However, I cannot move on without talking about the Atari 2600. So, it's I was doing research for this video, trying to find just like music and shit from games and like, soundtracks that I may not have heard before. And while I'm researching this Atari, I find out about this like fan project thing where they turned an Atari into a guitar, and they play concerts and shit. It's insane. It's so weird and cool and kind of hilarious because he's just banging out just sick riffs on on a goddamn Atari. The third generation of consoles is when video game music really started to become a thing. We got a ton of classic tunes during this era. Mario, Tetris, Zelda, Castlevania, Kirby, Final Fantasy, Metroid, and you get the idea. These games all started on the NES, and their music instantly became ingrained into the public subconscious. Like if I asked someone to guess where this song is from, no one's gonna go, Bioshock? I think the most impressive thing about these tracks is just how well some of them hold up. Sure, you can't exactly mosh to them, but when you're just chilling out and playing some Castlevania, and you hear them sweet tunes with the classic visuals, it instantly draws you closer into the world of the game. You're not just playing any old game anymore. You're playing Castlevania. Of course, then you die like 300 times, and you suddenly remember why you don't play NES that often. If I had to pick favorites, I mean, come on, who doesn't love Mega Man music? Every track for every Robot Master sounds catered to their specific gimmick, yet it all works together cohesively and still sounds like Mega Man music. Mega Man was one of the first NES games I ever decided to try out, and it was because of these killer tunes that I found on YouTube that I decided to give the series a shot. The thing is, game music in this era still didn't really sound like music. It has its own charm, but in comparison to normal music, yeah, this kind of sounds like a fax machine. However, once we hit the fourth generation of consoles, things really started to sound a lot more real. Game music became more orchestral and grand rather than the chiptune sounds of the era prior. You hear the Dark World theme from A Link to the Past and you're like, yeah, that's a trumpet. Or Fear of the Heavens from Secret of Mana, and you're like, yeah, that's a piano. Because of this newfound power, games of this generation had some particularly great soundtracks. Especially RPGs. Oh my god, this shit is so pretty. Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy VI, Secret of Mana. These games set the bar for what is a good traditional RPG soundtrack. Nintendo in general was just killing it this generation. Super Mario World took what was so good about the original Mario Bros. Music and added depth while maintaining its character. Donkey Kong Country's OST helped differentiate DKC from a typical Mario platformer and made his games way more atmospheric. Super Metroid was incredibly bold just for being so different. going from pretty much every game sounding like this to this. Yeah, safe to say I peed my pants. It also made those moments where the music really started to pick up and things were going crazy way more intense. But fuck all that. Because Genesis does what Nintendo don't. Rocket Knight, Castlevania Bloodlines, Rise Star, Streets of Rage 2, and oh, maybe this like little indie game no one's ever heard of called Sonic the Hedgehog? Maybe it's just me. But I feel like Genesis music and SNES music is completely different. Something about the Genesis is just, I don't know, funkier? I love SNES music, but Genesis music is like the cool kid in class who wears a leather jacket and rides a motorcycle and is kinda mean, but it's only because he cares. That metaphor went a little all over the place, but what I'm trying to say is that the Genesis was cool as hell. Honestly, this generation has so much good music, it's hard to pick what's my favorite. I mean, come on. You guys know me. I know me. We all knew it was gonna come to this. If I had to pick one, it'd probably be Sonic 3. That was when Sega really knew how to push the most power out of the Genesis, and it shows in the music. There is not a single track, besides Carnival Night Zone, that I don't love. It's just the perfect evolution of the previous game soundtracks. Sonic 1 being very iconic but lacking in depth, to Sonic 2, where there's certainly more depth, but it's quite similar to the first. To Sonic 3, which is just peak Sonic music. Plus games like Kirby Superstar, A Link Between Worlds, Secret of Mana, Mega Man X. This is without question one of my favorite generations of not only games, but game music. The 5th generation was just okay. Obviously, I don't hate the 5th generation of consoles. There are plenty of great games released during this generation, but the music just kinda felt the same for most franchises. It makes sense. With the jump to 3D, I don't think Nintendo's going, okay, but what about the sound? There were lots of new series this generation, however, many with their own unique sound. So what better way to start than to talk about the series that is named literally after instruments, Banjo and Kazooie. It's also known as the game that haunted my childhood. I would pop onto YouTube in 2010 just trying to watch someone talk about video games, and that damn music would always show up. Banjo and Kazooie has some really unique music that I don't like. It's completely a personal preference thing. I mean, I like music like this. And Banjo sounds like this. Very goofy, bordering on self-aware with how over-the-top the score is. But for Banjo, it works. The game itself is also very goofy, so they work together nicely. I personally just wouldn't be jamming out to it. Also, gotta give credit where credit's due. The way the level themes shift, whether you're above ground, underwater, or in some other area of the level, it's really impressive, especially considering the hardware it was on. Over on the PlayStation, we had quite a few new series, as this was Sony's first game console. And oh boy, did we get some games on this bad boy. Crash, Spyro, Resident Evil, Klonoa, Metal Gear Solid, Gran Turismo. These series all had their debut on the PS1 and created successful franchises. Except for Klonoa, which breaks my heart. The music in Crash is really interesting to me, as just from looking at the game you might think it sounds similar to Donkey Kong Country, since they're both platformers that take place in a jungle setting. But Crash and Donkey Kong Country music are very distinct from one another. I just think it's cool to see how two games with very similar themes have very unique musical identities. On the opposite end of the spectrum, Resident Evil and Silent Hill. They don't necessarily have music, more so atmospheric noise. You wouldn't be jamming out to this on your iPod. The reason I'm highlighting these two in this video is because they represent a shift in game music. No longer was it just a backing track while you were running around collecting coins. The music was part of the experience. It actively elevated the game. So many games this generation had such iconic soundtracks, the kind that when you think of them, you also think of its music. Games like Sonic Adventure, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, Final Fantasy VII, Guilty Gear, Parappa the Rapper, and of course, Pepsi Man. Now for the 6th generation, I want you to imagine yourself as a little 5-year-old stumbling into your basement to watch your older brother play some video games and getting hit with this. You didn't know it back then, but that moment is the start of your very complicated relationship with a fictional blue hedgehog and his company who can't ever seem to be consistent with their games, while your love for the series is ever dwindling, yet you never feel... Sonic Adventure 2 released in 2001, originally for the Dreamcast and later for the GameCube, and it has some of my favorite tunes in any game ever. It doesn't matter. Believe in myself. Unknown from me. Flying the Freedom. City Escape. Metal Harbor. Green Forest. I can keep going. But what else came out this generation? Hold on 1 second. Holy shit, there were a lot of good games this generation. Not only did we get more Sonic games, which, of course, always have bangers, but games like Wind Waker, Okami, Kingdom Hearts, and... both Persona 3 and 4 came out this generation, and ooh, these games have some jams! Persona 3's OST is super slick, with most of the songs either being these smooth, chill jams, inspirational piano melodies, or hype rock anthems. Persona 4's OST is similar, but it takes that chill meter and just... Overall, I think I like Persona 4's OST more, but man, there's a reason they made a Persona 3 dancing game just 2 years ago. As long as we're talking about games I would marry, Jet Set Radio! Jet Set's OST is sort of hard to sell to, you know, normal people, and I will admit, it gets a little annoying sometimes. But god damn if it's not charming as hell. It's loud, it's obnoxious, it uses like 300 samples per song, and it fits the game so well. Jet Set Radio has always been about rebelling and being a general nuisance to law enforcement, and the music really puts you into that mindset of being an absolute degenerate punk. It's great. If I had to describe the overall evolution of music this generation, besides going hard as fuck, it'd probably be the continuation of what we saw last generation. Last gen we saw a lot more experimentation and interesting soundtracks in games, and with this generation pretty much all big releases were putting a lot of effort to making sure their music went well with their games and was unique, although that kinda all went down the drain the following generation. I don't mean to trash the 7th generation of consoles, but I'm gonna trash the 7th generation of consoles. It just seems like a lot of the biggest games this generation were just trying to emulate movies. And because of that, we got a lot of games with very movie-like soundtracks. Now that's not entirely a bad thing. Sounding like a movie isn't exactly a diss on the games, but my god it's boring. Sure, it's big and theatrical, but nothing from these OSTs resonate with me. Like the title track from The Last of Us sounds great, it's well composed and the tone of it fits The Last of Us super well. But nothing about this is interesting. This could be the theme to any sad survival game. However, this generation isn't completely devoid of good music. Everyone say thank you to Sonic. Okay, this is kinda cheating since pretty much all the music in Sonic Generations is from other games, but the remixes are so good that I'm just gonna ignore that. Ni no Kuni's soundtrack is pretty great too. And I know some people will say, hey, that game's OST is theatrical too. And you're right. But the difference between this and this is while both are similar to their contemporaries, Ni no Kuni's music paints much more of an image in your mind. When I hear the world map theme, I can see the grand world that lays before me. I see the fantasy creatures that inhabit those lands, and it fills me with the anticipation to explore those lands and find what awaits there. When I hear The Last of Us OST, I think of the color brown. Besides Ni no Kuni, there was Rayman Legends, which had some pretty great tunes that went with the varied level themes. And Xenoblade had some fantastic music that's equal parts beautiful and awesome, and what else had good music this generation? Wii Sports had some neat tunes for a pack-in game. Oh yeah!
You never see it come back. You say that my mind is too fast for right.
Persona 5 is one of those exceptionally rare games where I don't think there's a single song on this OST that I dislike. Every song fits perfectly for every situation in the game, whether that's fighting giant demons, exploring the metaverse, or just having a coffee with your buddy. It's so jazzy, so slick, so cool in every possible way. It very well might be my favorite OST of all time. So yeah, while this generation was a little bland, we still got some cool OSTs. And finally, 5 pages into the script, the current generation of consoles. Well, current for at least the next few months. This generation is where I see the most divide between AAA titles and niche titles in terms of music. The AAA games have grand instrumentals with so much production behind them you can practically hear the money. However, a lot of it feels repetitive, and again, movie-like. I will reiterate that being movie-like is not a bad thing, and even I'll admit that these games I'm showing all at least have one song that makes me go, now that's what I call good video game music, number 53. However, when compared to stuff like this, yeah, it's kinda lame. Games like Nier, Breath of the Wild, Cuphead, these games all have really unique musical identities. Nier, with its somber melodies and beautiful lyrics written in the game's own language. Breath of the Wild, with its understated yet poignant tracks that emphasize the loneliness of the game. And Cuphead for being jazzy! Plenty of devs still value originality in their scores. Just seems that as we move further and further towards every game being a cinematic third-person story-driven action-adventure, the music becomes incredibly stale. But hey, that won't stop indies from hitting us with some incredible stuff. Hollow Knight, Celeste, Ori, and the most infamous of the bunch, Undertale. Toby Fox, the creator of Undertale, was actually a music producer before starting development on Undertale. And I think that really shows through the game. Each area, each character, everything has some great music to go with it. From goofy, to sad, to inspiring, to epic. It hits all the tones it needs to with some chiptune flair. And in the sequels, spin-off, the next game after Undertale, Deltarune, has, in my opinion, even better music. In particular though, some of my favorite soundtracks of the generation have got to be Sonic Mania, Splatoon, Bayonetta, and Final Fantasy VII Remake. Particularly, I want to talk about Final Fantasy VII because I'm playing through it right now, and god damn, the music is incredible. Not to get into spoilers or anything, but when you're in the tunnels and they bust out them fat synths, in short, video game music be kinda good sometimes. We've come a long way from the beeps and boops of the 2600 to now where entire symphonies are selling out concert halls to play orchestral covers of Zelda music, and they completely deserve to. While gameplay is obviously the most important thing in a game, music can add so much to the experience. When you're ripping and tearing in Doom, yeah, it's cool, but it's the intense hard metal soundtrack that pushes you to turn some demon brain into some demon pudding. It's the adventurous sound of Wind Waker encouraging you to explore the vast ocean and fight a giant fucking squid. It's the rebellious attitude of City Escape that makes you want to run through as slick as possible. And it's all of these things that make video game music so special.